Welcome to the Josh Hall Web Design Show. Helping you build better websites and create a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hey everybody, welcome into episode 67. In this one, we're going to be talking about a really important subject. I think it's very timely, especially for those of you who are just starting out in your web design business and into this wild world of freelancing, because we're going to talk about how to be confident in sales and how to be confident in actually starting and growing your business. It's easier said than done, but I've found with a few little practical methods and strategies, you can really feel confident even if you're brand new in your journey. And I wanted to bring somebody in for this talk who specifically helps freelancers in a variety of different industries. This is Jay Clouse. He is the creator of the Freelancing School. And again, he helps freelancers in all industries with building, growing, and really taking their business to the next level. And I was talking with him recently. He's actually a local guy as well with me here in Columbus, Ohio. And we were chatting, and we talked about some potential subjects we could go into in regards to freelancing. And he asked if my audience would be interested in learning more about sales in the early days. And I said, absolutely. I think I actually put that in the email because I get a lot of questions from students who are learning a lot about Divi, WordPress, and their business, but inevitably, confidence from sales, particularly in the early days, is tricky. And I remember that. I remember in the early days having to feel confident and wondering how I could sell when I was very new and I didn't have too much experience. So that's exactly what we're going to cover in this interview. Jay is awesome. You're going to love this interview. I think you're going to love his style. And I think you're really going to love these points because they're going to help you feel empowered and confident to start selling your web design services right now, even if you're just starting out with zero experience. Now, one of the best ways, I'll just give you a quick tip, one of the best ways to feel more confident from the get-go is to know your craft. And one very simple way to do that in the case of you as a web designer is to know WordPress and to know whatever theme you're using. And for those of you who use Divi, as you probably know by listening to this podcast, I've used Divi exclusively since 2014. It's my trusted theme. If you want to learn Divi and you want to feel confident about the tools that you use, I want to invite you to join my Divi WordPress Beginners course. It is a point A to point B quick, down and dirty course that is going to help empower you to learn Divi, learn the most important aspects of it, and learn WordPress as well, so you can start building sites right out of the gate with also no code required. So I do have courses on CSS and stuff like that, but we don't have to do that right now. The most important thing you need to do is learn the basics and learn how to build a nice site from start to finish. And we can do that right now in my Divi WordPress Beginners course, and that'll help you feel more confident. Now, to get on to some more ways to feel more confident with getting into sales as you're just starting out, enjoy my interview with Jay Clouse. Dude's awesome. And if you want to connect with Jay, go to his website at freelancing.school. You can see everything that he offers to help you in your business. And if you're interested in diving into any of his courses or trainings, he offered a special discount for all of my listeners. And if you're interested in any of his stuff, use code Josh Hall at checkout and you'll get 20% off. So without further ado, enjoy hearing from Jay, and let's talk about how you can get more confident in sales right from the beginning. Let's do it. Jay, welcome to the show. Great to have you on, man.
I'm so happy to be here, Josh. Great to meet you. Great to meet a fellow Columbusite. Have we decided?
I don't know what the proper term is there. Yeah, Columbusonian. I like that. We'll roll with that. And actually, on that note, I always like to start off with asking where you're located and what you do. So I think we established that you're in Columbus along with myself, although I can't believe we haven't met in person yet, but I think we're going to make that happen here. So I'm not going to ask you where you're from because everyone knows that now. But yeah, what do you do, Jay, exactly?
So these days, I think of myself as a creator. I spend a lot of my time podcasting now. I spend a lot of my time writing and creating articles. But the things to know, my business is called Freelancing School. It's a platform to help people make a living freelancing. And I focus more so on the business aspects, finance, marketing, sales, as opposed to any one freelance discipline. I have a podcast called Creative Elements where I interview some aspirational creators that, frankly, I just want to have their life. I've talked to Seth Godin and James Clear and Vanessa Van Edwards and try to figure out, outside of their work, how do they actually build a platform for themselves to be able to do this full time? Um, that's a lot of fun. And then, I've been freelancing myself for several years outside of that, through a variety of different services that always look a little bit custom. So yeah, it's these days I like to think of myself as a creator, a writer, a podcaster.
Well, I love your approach, man. I checked out your podcast. The first one I listened to was the one with Seth Godin because I'm a big fan of his with a lot of his books. Actually, when I first really started reading, when I became an entrepreneur and adult, his books were some of the first that really resonated with me. So yeah, I found that chat fascinating. And I do love that approach because I think a lot of people, when they get into freelance, or at least people who teach people in freelance, they get into a lot of the know-how and the tech stuff, but it's what is behind all that that really sets you up for success. And I think we're going to talk about some really, really cool stuff in this chat because we're going to talk about freelancing in general, and then also confidence in sales, particularly when you're just starting out, which before we went live, I told you a lot of my web design students are coming to me to get help in this area, and they're coming from different industries. I've got teachers, Uber drivers. I've got people who worked in brick and mortar stores, business owners who can't run their business now and they're transitioning to web design. A lot of my students now were doing web design on the side, and then they had to go full time with it to make ends meet through COVID. So I'm really excited to help them out with this, but more importantly, give them some confidence with sales. So I think a great place to start, Jay, I'd love to hear from you and your perspective, since you work with a lot of different people, interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs. Why do you think freelancing is, most of us probably know the answer to this question, but why do you think now is a good time for freelancing?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like that old adage of the best time to plant a tree was 25 years ago. The second best time is today. Same is true with freelancing. I think it's only going to get more and more true that we're living in a world that is very much decentralized and remote, and our style of work is changing, and COVID has been a catalyst to push that forward even more. So whether you're freelancing directly with small clients and individuals, or whether you're freelancing for larger companies, they are all in a place where they're getting used to remote work arrangements. And when you're drawn to freelancing, usually it's some combination of having a desire for more optionality, more control over your time, more control over where you are, when you work, who you work with. And, I think we're living in a time when, despite all of its flaws and all the bad stuff happening in 2020, it's become more and more valid and viable and feasible to work remotely, work for yourself, and freelance very successfully.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, man. I know it was interesting once March hit this year with the COVID stuff. It really reaffirmed my journey up to this point, being that I took freelancing so seriously. And when I felt pressured to get a corporate job and to go to college to get a 9 to 5, I just never felt that it was right for me. And I'm so glad I stuck to my guns and went the freelancing route, because now things are really taking off. And it is in this time where a lot of people who were on a traditional path are finding, and there's not a lot of security in most industries right now. So I think there's no better time than the present for freelancing. And I don't know how much you know about my show or my audience, but it's mainly all web designers. But we are freelancers and entrepreneurs at heart, particularly those who are really, running their business and scaling their business. So I think we have a good idea of why now is a great time. I'd love to start out with just diving into sales, because this is tricky, man. When you get started, particularly if you're new to the game, you may know how to build a good website. You've been through some of my courses. I've trained you as best as I can, but for my audience, I tell my students all the time, it is up to you to make it happen. So you have to apply what you learn in this podcast and in my courses, but it's easier said than done, particularly with confidence. So I guess maybe my question around confidence is, where do you think confidence comes from?
I think confidence comes from trying something and seeing that it works in big ways and in small ways, and just that over and over and over and over again. Like, confidence is learned. It's easy to say, like, you got to be confident, and it's really hard to just flip a switch. You can't really. So to me, confidence is setting small bets, and any conversation that I go into, I have a desired outcome usually for that conversation, especially if it's related to a client or a potential client. And when you do that, when you set like these very small goals for yourself with even interactions or days, when you meet those goals, you build confidence. So every week that I'm saying, this week, these are the 5 things I want to get done this week. When I follow through and do that, that builds confidence. Every week when I say I'm shipping a podcast episode and I do that, that builds confidence, because now I've shown to myself that not only can I set goals, but I hit the goals that I set for myself. And I think a lot of people subconsciously subvert their own confidence because they set goals that they don't even actually believe when they set them they're going to achieve. And that has the reverse effect. When you set a goal and you don't live up to it, even if it's subconsciously on a small level, you stop respecting your own ability to get things done on the time frame that you say you're going to, and it affects your confidence. So I really think it starts with setting these goals for yourself on a small level, achieving them, rinse and repeat all day, every week, just over and over and over.
That's great. I was just thinking about the approach of, even when it comes to getting a client, just landing that first step, which may not even be landing them as a client, but just getting the opportunity to put together a proposal like that, I imagine kind of feels like a win.
Yep.
Whereas if you go into it thinking like, okay, I want to land a client for life in this first meeting, like first meeting has a lot of implications, and it's important to make a good first impression, but maybe that's a great approach to have. Just take the first step with getting a feel for their business, making sure they like you if you really want them as a client. And then that first win would be to do a really good proposal, and maybe more importantly, feel like you did a good job. Is that something? It sounds like your approach is, if you have to feel confident with yourself and feel like you did a good job and gave your all before somebody else is going to feel like that.
Totally. And most of what we do is internal work. And most of the work that we do is, especially as a freelancer, we are withholden to ourselves. So on a daily basis, did I get done today what I wanted to get done? That will translate to the conversations you have with clients. That'll translate to the work that you do with them. But I love that you brought up the question of, or the idea of, just getting the meeting with a client, because statistically speaking, almost no one in your life is going to be a client for you. However, anyone in your life can be a fantastic advocate and source of referrals for your business. So if you go into conversations and instead of thinking, I need this to be a client relationship for life, and you go into it thinking, I want to make a good impression and I want to build a new relationship here, you can be successful in every conversation that you have in long term, even medium term. If you do that with every conversation you have for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, now you have this fantastic network of advocates who are out there who know what you do. If they know, like, and trust you, they can refer that on to somebody else. And you can have inbound referrals that you don't have to do anything with, because you don't have to do anything to gain, because you've already done the legwork of building a network of, friends and positive advocates.
Yeah, that's a great point. It reminds me, like, episode a little while back, I talked about how I practically and literally landed my top best 15 clients, and it was all relationship based. It was all, even though some of them took months to pan out, or they were just referrals of somebody in their network, I often just started with, I just want to make this person like me. As long as it was somebody I really wanted to work with, I felt like they'd be a good connection. I just want to make a good impression on them. And that is really, I think that takes the stress and pressure off of sales if you just focus on, more importantly, just helping them and listening to their goals and their problems and seeing how you can help. I think that the more people I've talked to who are successful, particularly in web design, is it's problem solving and just being empathetic to somebody's situation and explaining to them how you can help them. So I think that's really valuable, man. And I think something you said there that was really interesting too was the goals, or maybe not deadlines, but your goals for the year, or having a realistic approach to whether it's how much you can make or how many clients. I mean, I imagine you want to set a realistic expectation. I guess that's what I meant to say, was an expectation. You want to have it be realistic, but you also, I feel like you don't want to limit yourself, because some of my web design students are like, I'd love to make 10 grand. I'm like, dude, we could, like with where you're at, you could triple, quadruple, even, do more than that. So how do you feel about expectations and challenging yourself, but also not setting it too high to where you're depressed because you're like, oh, I'm not even close?
I think it's important because, to me, even going beyond freelancing, I think all conflict, the source is a misalignment of expectations and the result. So you are constantly making social contracts with yourself and others, but with yourself for your expectations of what's going to happen in a given situation. And when you don't meet those expectations, there's conflict, either in the form of internal cognitive dissonance or disappointment and maybe even guilt or shame. And it can be hard. It can be hard to set fairly arbitrary goals around like revenue numbers if you don't have a deeper reason as to why or what that means for you. So I find if somebody does, say, I want to make six figures, if you dig into why and you help them tie that to something a little bit more tangible, it's a little bit more exciting than this fleeting thing of just like, I did it. I broke the six-figure mark.
Yeah.
It drives them even more. And I experienced this like when you're starting out freelancing. And when I started freelancing, my first goal was, can I just earn enough to survive? Right.
Yeah.
And then you cross that and you get to a point where you have a little bit of comfort. And it's like, oh, this is kind of nice. Well, now what are my goals? And you kind of go to this place of like 10 grand a month, that's a round number, or six figures, that's a round number, but it feels hollow. And it wasn't until I had more of a like why behind the goal that allowed me to push past those limits, because I think that you kind of perform to the level of your comfort. So you have to make yourself almost a little bit uncomfortable if you don't hit those goals. And if you're covering your financial needs, that discomfort may be, well, I'm not saving as much as I would like every month for retirement, or I'm not putting anything towards a down payment on a house, or some of these bigger goals. When you can peg that in there, that really helps. But ultimately, to your question about expectations, I do think that for yourself, like you want to constantly be reinforcing to yourself that you are somebody that lives up to your own goals and metrics for success. And that doesn't mean that you should take it easy on yourself, but it does need to be within the realm of possibility or it becomes meaningless.
I like that you'd said get out of your comfort zone a little bit or get a little uncomfortable. I think that's a great place to be in. Now, I wouldn't advocate that, you're getting so uncomfortable that you can't focus or it's just outside of your realm of expertise or something you can handle. But the people who do stay in their comfort zone for too long, I think that's where people do get stagnant. And what I've found in any business, if you're not marketing and you're not innovating, your business is going to get stale, or you're just not going to be in a good place to really move it forward and hit goals or hit your why. So I love that idea. I think that a little challenge goes a long way. And I want to make sure I reaffirm everybody in saying that that's good. Like if you're uncomfortable going to a networking group or doing a Zoom meeting, or you're uncomfortable with presenting in front of a group, that is good. You'll be amazed at how far that will take you and how far you'll level up. And I'm a prime example of that. I used to be terrible on camera, and I've had to do videos and do this podcast and do stuff every day to get better. I even look at videos from a few years ago and it's like, oh man, I mean, it's like night and day, but it's just that repetitive action, like you talked about earlier, that can really breed confidence. So that was great. I'd love to hear a little bit more about sales in general and confidence, because you talked about having a why. That's really good. I think you also touched on having a plan. Like if you're going to hit six figures, why? Why do you need six figures? For me, I have a family now. I have a wife and two kids, and I need to make comfortable six figures to provide for us. A few years ago, that wasn't the case. So there's a lot of why there. There's the plan as far as like what our family goals are, what my business goals are. But in the early days, for the average freelancer who may not have as much of these pressures, where do some other areas of confidence come in? Do you think it's knowledge as far as like knowing your craft? Is it going through courses like you and I do to help people to kind of bypass the years of hardship? Where would some other areas of confidence be found?
Yeah. And I think, again, I think it's these little small moments of celebration. And I think it's really important to celebrate small wins and small achievements, because that's what builds your confidence. And it's just, I wish I had a better way of putting it, but it's just wanting a result and seeing that result happen. That builds confidence in some way, and for getting new clients, it's saying this conversation, I know there's promise here. I'm going to make this person, interested in working with me. If it's even getting the first conversation, I want to work with this brand. I'm going to find a way to talk with somebody there. Once you do that, you're like, great, I did it. I found someone to talk to. Now I'm going to figure out how to position this as something that they're interested in. Great. Now I'm going to try to get them to sign a contract. Great. Now I'm going to make a result in this project that they're really happy with. Great. Every iteration of this process, if you're showing to yourself, I am doing what I said I was going to do, and this other person's happy, I'm happy, that builds confidence. And something else I think builds confidence is actually being willing to walk away from things. And this is really hard to do in the beginning, because when you're in that place of, I just want to be able to make enough to continue to survive, you get really almost desperate. And actually, I kind of refer to this as just being like thirsty. Like clients can feel when you're thirsty for this, and it's not a good signal to be putting out. They can also feel when you know your value and trust your value so much that you're willing to walk away. And the unfortunate reality is the people who are really good at this, like they get better and better, and they have more and more work because they get continuously more confident and more willing to walk away from things that don't fit what they want to do and what they think is right. In the beginning, when you don't have that confidence, you kind of just, you might be a pushover. You might take a rate that you don't want.
May never say no.
Yeah, you might take a project that you don't want. And the other reality is whatever you're doing kind of naturally creates more of that. So if you're working with a client that you don't like, that doesn't fit for X, Y, or Z reason, that's probably going to breed more clients like that. When you work with the good clients and good organizations that you're excited about, that will breed more of that too, because it kind of, there's a lot of social signaling in selling where people see, oh, you worked with this company, this organization, we trust you because of that, and now we're going to work with you too. But it works against you if you're not careful.
That's a great point. Yeah, you tend to attract whatever type of client or project you're working on. I know a lot of times, like later on in my career, I would have leads that went right to my portfolio, and I would show up and we'd have a meeting, and they'd be like, well, I really like this site that you did and this site. And then for me, it was a total win. It was a hot lead. It went from me trying to sell anything to them like really interested in working with me. But again, when you're just getting started out, it's a little tougher when you have less experience. I know one thing I really recommend my students do is there's no shame in doing either free or cheap work just to build a portfolio, but don't do it for long. Like build your portfolio, get some experience. Clients who are going to pay you eventually never need to know that those projects were free, but just build your portfolio and have a few projects under your belt so you feel confident with the process and everything. And honestly, that's what my courses are for. And I know you have a lot of material too to help people get started in their journey. But I think that is really, really key for folks starting out. Those small wins, like you talked about, kind of one step at a time, realistic expectations, but not too far to where they're just barely, maybe not attainable, but then also you don't want to limit yourself. I think that one step approach is a really good way to go. And you're talking about a much more organic approach, which I think is super valuable. And the one really good thing that we have as web designers is we have the opportunity to make clients for life, which, like I talked about, you want to have that in the back of their mind. You don't want to be that sweaty salesman like you're talking about that's showing desperation and stuff. But the cool thing is we can get to a point where once you get a few clients, the referral train starts and it just starts kind of rolling from there.
Yeah.
As long as you do really good and come through.
Totally. And that's a great position to be in. And that's a great reason to be a web designer. Probably when a client signs up with you the first time, they're not necessarily signing up for that. But it becomes that because it's a relationship. It becomes that over time because when you do the first project really well, they say, I like that. I'm going to keep working with him on this. And then it gets to a point where they can't imagine working with anybody else and having to reteach, their culture or the way they think about things to somebody else.
Yeah. And I know you coach people from all different industries. With web design, what's interesting too, and one thing that I tell all my students right from the get-go, because you have to have this mindset, is even if a client doesn't sign up with you on your monthly plan or do any recurring work, you are still the person who designed their site. So eventually you're going to hear from them. It's not like a coaching service or consulting or something where you might work with somebody for a little bit and then they never have to talk to you again. At some point, that person or that company is going to be like, who the heck designed our site? So you're going to have that relationship. There's a big bonus in that, but I hope that students think about that when it comes to the confidence to sell somebody, or maybe not even sell somebody, but to work with somebody and land that client, because it is something that's going to go a long way. And honestly, it's one of the best ways to come across earlier in your career is just to be, again, helpful, be empathetic, and show how you're excited and share ideas. And then just tell clients, one thing I always told them was, it is good for you to shop around, and it's important for you to like and want to work with somebody for a long time. And honestly, here's a little free tip for everybody just getting started in web design. If you tell your leads that they should be careful about who they work with because it's going to last a very long time, they're going to be talking to their web designer, it actually makes you look really good because you're thinking about that. You're not like that shady SEO company that is just wanting a quick $2.99 a month and then they, disappear after that. So hopefully those are all some things that kind of help with the confidence. You were talking earlier about, landing one client that first time just to build some muscle and build some confidence. What about those who are just still struggling? Maybe they're getting a lot of leads, but they just haven't maybe converted that first one yet. Or maybe they're close, but they just haven't quite crossed that step. What kind of encouragement would you give to them?
More and more, I'm realizing how much clients are comforted by your own certainty, because we have so many options. We have infinite options for just about anything we want to do ever, which has created this like giant fear. You can call it FOMO, or you can just call it like just being afraid of making the wrong choice and feeling regret over that. And so when you're talking with a potential client, the more that you can step forward and really make it clear for them that they're making the right choice all along the way. And it's not explicit saying you're making the right choice here. It's more about, listening to them, taking some notes and saying, okay, so if I can repeat this back to you, here's what I'm hearing you say. What's important to you is A, B, and C. And your timeline is this. You need this done by this date. You want to have these things involved. Like, it shows a professionalism that you're listening, that you're cutting through the noise and pulling out the things that are important. And then you can step forward and say, okay, here's what I propose. In order to get this done by that date you just said, we need to get this started 2 weeks from now, whatever your timeline is. Just lay out these steps of here's how the process is going to go. Because if someone's coming and considering hiring you, they want you to be the leader in the process. They want you to solve this for them. They want you to make it easy. The more that you can take over and say, here's exactly what we're going to do. Here are the points in the process. I'm going to need your feedback. And this is the type of feedback that I need. And I'll have this done for you. I'll have this outcome for you. I'll have these deliverables, and it'll be done on this date. Here's the price. How does that sound? You lower the bar to making them just say, yes, that sounds great. I would love to not think about this. You do your thing. When you need me, let me know. Otherwise, go and do this. That is what you need to approach these conversations with. That's what's going to speak to somebody to say, this person knows exactly what I need. They've been here before. I trust them. I'm going to let them run with it.
That's great. Just that small win and just those little action steps. I know clients really respond to a few action steps that are reasonable and practical. And it goes back, I'm a big proponent of StoryBrand and the idea that you as a designer are the hero, or you're the guide and you're walking your client through the journey. They are the hero. It's all about them, but you are the one who's going to help them get there. And even if you're early on, you can still do that in a variety of different ways, even if you're not a quote unquote expert or seasoned veteran in the industry. And for me, I've been doing web design for over 10 years now. So I have to kind of think about those first few months that I got started. For me, more than anything, it was just about sharing my passion and sharing my ideas. And I knew, and I was very open with clients, like, you know what? I'm not sure about this, but I'm going to look into it. I'm definitely going to see if I can't figure it out, I'll partner with somebody or we can get a third party involved. Like, I was really intentional to be their guy, their person to figure it out. And that really paid off in those early days. It was really about establishing know, like, and trust from the get-go. And that, I think that hopefully that's freeing to everybody, because you don't need to be an expert to land a client. You don't need to be a seasoned veteran. As long as somebody knows you, they like you, and they feel like they can trust you, then you can work it out and you can start landing clients, and that will build that muscle, that freelancing muscle. Any other ideas on that just in those early days? I mean, we've covered some really good strategies, but I think when it comes to building that confident muscle in freelancing, it just does take those kind of action steps. Anything else like that?
This is a small thing, but I would recommend when you get positive feedback, save that somewhere, somehow, so that when you're not feeling great, you can revisit this and see the things that people said about you and about your work when you were at your best and when you were feeling great, because we internalize negative signals so strongly. And then we will like greet positive signs as they float past us. Like we won't take that to heart. And that's an opportunity to really strengthen our own confidence when we do that. So I do recommend having like a good feels folder in your inbox or something similar like that, so you can remind yourself when you're feeling down.
I just started doing that. I don't know why I haven't done that up to the last couple months, because I do get testimonials from my courses which are great because I can just revisit those, and I have. But one thing I neglected for a long time was when people would email me. I got
Mhm.
so many great emails, and then I think back, I'm like, crap, who sent that awesome note? And then I can never, it's lost in my email. I'm never going to find it. So more recently, I've started doing that. If it's not a review or a video testimonial or something that I have already captured, I set up a little happy folder of just, yeah, like a good thoughts folder, which will really go a long way. I think that could also go with encouragement, whether it's a clip. I mean, even like with the podcast here, like if somebody hears something, just make a note of it at, Jay Clouse at, 2022, he said something really cool that you can refer back to. It's really worthwhile taking notes like that and having some sort of backlog when you need it, because inevitably you are going to need it. I think a lot of people see somebody who's more successful in an industry and they feel like it's just been an easy ride and they just had all the answers. Well, the reality is, and I'm sure you can attest to this, Jay, is I don't know your full story, your journey, but I'm sure there were a lot of mistakes made
Oh,
along
yeah,
the
of
way, a
course.
lot of hard lessons learned. So it's never as easy as it sounds. And particularly in web design, I just a student last week maybe the week before was like, you just seem so confident. Where did you learn your confidence? And I said, honestly, it was just figuring stuff out the hard way. I do my courses to help people avoid as many hard lessons learned. But the confidence, I think for me, did come from that standpoint of I realized my value and I didn't back down from that. I was very empathetic and tried to work with clients, but I'm not going to cut my price by 50%. And what was interesting is I meant to mention this earlier, but when you talked about that, not taking every opportunity, not, being a pushover with your pricing, your value, it did make clients want to work with me even more because I did stand up for it. And I had some cases where I had clients reject the offer. And the thing for me is I just didn't burn the bridge. I was like, that's fine. You're always welcome to revisit this moving forward. The proposal might be different, but we can always revisit it. And I had a number of clients come back a month or two later and they were like, we went the cheap route. Terrible experience. If you're still open to it, we'll move forward today, and we move forward. So
Totally.
there's a lot of things like that will help people just one step at a time.
Pricing is interesting because pricing is usually a story that the client is telling themselves. Depending on the industry and just depending on who you're speaking with, like pricing is more of a marketing strategy than anything else. Like if you bill $100 per hour, some clients that's going to be like, whoa, I can't afford that. And some clients are going to be like, I'm not even sure I'm going to take you seriously billing at that because the other people we work with bill at $500 per hour. So you got to know, what pond you're fishing in and what their appetite is for that type of thing. But yeah, pricing, people often use it as a quality heuristic too. So if you're undercutting yourself on pricing, you're sending a signal that you are not, the best, safest, highest quality option to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was thinking back. I first ran Craigslist ads once I started getting clients, and I actually did land a couple qualified people. Most of it was spam, but I'll never forget my ad said cheap web design. So looking back, man, I wish I would have had a mentor tell me, "Hey, Josh, don't say cheap web design. Don't say cheap web design."
Oh no!
So that is not a strategy I would recommend. Now, let's talk about that, man. Let's talk about pricing and a money mindset, because of all the mindset shifts I've had over the past decade as an entrepreneur, I think money may be the top, just with how I view it and how I plan with it. And obviously, like I said, I have a family now. I have to be much more intentional. I make a lot more of it now because I'm so much more focused and value my time more than anything. So I'm a better delegator now. But in the early days, your mindset of money is tricky because it's likely that you have low expectations, or I know for me, I didn't realize how much money a lot of companies made. I mean, not every company has an endless budget, but like $2,000 sounded like a lot for me. I remember the first proposal I did for like $2,000. I was like, probably like $2,000. Whereas now that's not even our floor. That's not even my agency's starting point. So, what would you encourage people with when it comes to like a money mindset, both from pricing and then just how to think about it as an entrepreneur?
What I find myself talking about a lot lately that I need everyone to hear, and I need to remind myself all the time.
I'm pumped.
When you think about the price that you're telling somebody, often there's a voice inside of us that says, "Yeah, but would I pay that for this?" And you need to realize, of course you wouldn't, because you have the skills to do the thing. You wouldn't pay anything for it because you can do it yourself. it's hard to divorce yourself from that and put yourself in the mind space of the client who doesn't have the skills. Their choice is either to spend a lot of time to try and learn the skills and hopefully do as good of a job as you, or to throw money at the problem. And almost all clients want to throw money at the problem. That's why you're having the conversation. So first and foremost, don't ever ask yourself, would I pay this for that? If you have the skills to do it, remove that question. Second, what blows my mind, money is a story to ourselves too. I mentioned that money is kind of a story to clients, but for web designers, think about this. You're going to spend the same amount of work for client A as client B if you're building a similar scoped project. But if client B is a much bigger company with a much higher market cap, you should be charging more to them. Like, that just makes a lot of sense. It's not about the input necessarily. It's about what value it's bringing to the client. And I would love to sit here and talk you through value-based pricing because, yes, it's certainly the best way to go. It's also really difficult, especially if you're getting started. It's really hard to walk through all the questions to get mathematical answers to show the client, this is why what I'm doing is worth this much. But what you should know is you can do the same work for a different class of client and get paid a lot more. And you should ask yourself if that's what you want to do, because you can literally move yourself from thinking in the hundreds of dollars to in the thousands of dollars. And it's just a mindset shift, and it's where you're fishing. Everything else stays the same.
I've seen that play out with clients. I have a business course, and one of the lessons in there, I actually show people my quote for my highest project, but at that point was $15,000. And it was definitely something I would have done for like $5,000. But this company was well into the 7 figures. I'm like, they can freaking afford, this is important to their business. So I want to do it right. And I just went for it and tripled the rate, and they went for it. Whereas a lot of companies would have been like, that 5,000, they would have been like, oh, 5,000. Value-based pricing is fascinating. And maybe we could do a separate episode just on those pricing models. But I think that is an important approach to have. Just remember, money doesn't look the same to everybody. It's often different. And hopefully good clients are going to value it and look at it as an investment. I think that's important too. Just practically, don't put cost on a proposal. I used to always do investment, like total investment or something like that, just to make sure people know it's not something they're just going to throw their money away at. It's going to help build their business. It's interesting too, when I think about pricing, like for my courses and other sorts of products now, I've always found pricing to be tough because I want it to work for everybody, but I also don't want to devalue it. And the business course I mentioned is $497, and I've had people say, "There's no way I could afford that. That's way too much." And then I've had people say, why are you putting this out there for that cheap? I had somebody recently say, this should be at least a $3,000 course. And it is funny, like there's just all this different these mindsets around a product, which is pretty fascinating. And I think it's a great place to think about, particularly when you're starting out. Just remember to hold your value, to stand your ground. I mean, you can realistically look at what people are charging, and I have a ton of resources on pricing for free that people can check out. But I think that's a really good point. Any other thoughts on pricing and establishing your worth?
Yeah, just think about the type of client you're working with. Like, what is their price elasticity? Like, you and I, we may be sensitive to increments of $50 or $100, maybe $200. Some clients aren't thinking about that at all. Like, their sensitivities are in increments of thousands of dollars, so like a $6,000 quote versus an $8,000 quote is actually not important to them. And it's easy for you to make that. Now, if you go from 6 to 12, maybe it is, but yeah, it's crazy to me just how much price insensitivity larger companies have, and maybe it's worth talking with them. Now, it's going to be really hard if you want to work with nonprofits and startups. Like, these are fun companies to work with. People want to work with these companies. Their price sensitivities are much, much different. It's hard. And if you start there, you often get a warped sense of what is possible with your pricing because you're laddering, you're tethering that to those experiences.
That's
you really need to think about each conversation individually, each circumstance individually, and not try to bring the baggage from past clients into those conversations unless there is a very strong connection between the two. And you say, actually, these companies are very, very similar. And this is what I learned over here. if they're very different companies, like you need to start from square zero in terms of, or square one, whatever square you start from, in terms of, your pricing.
That's a great point. Just because one person's, shocked that you sent a $2,500 proposal in the case of web design, the next company or lead you talk to, that may be nothing. That may be like I had that happen left and right. I remember I did an e-commerce quote. I had a lead, and I was just under $2,000 for this simple e-commerce store, which was just insanely low for anything e-commerce. And they emailed back and they said, unbelievable. Are you kidding me with this pricing? Like no one would ever pay that much for this. And then right after that, I had a similar proposal and they were like, we were honestly expecting it to be like triple this price. So it really is. It's a fascinating, different world. It's a different case for everybody, which I think is why you should, really it comes to weeding out too. I tell all my students, you don't want to get every lead that comes your way. In web design, you want it to be the qualified people. Any ideas on how to filter that out and really maybe get into better industries and getting to better clients, especially when you're just starting out?
Price is a lot of it because if you are closing every lead you get, you're either not putting yourself out there and not working with enough clients, or you're pricing too low. And people are basically saying, this is a steal. They're basically taking advantage of you. So you want to get a lot of no's. I've had a circumstance this year where literally I had 2 big clients this year, 2 of my biggest clients. I quoted them on a project and they ended up offering me more than I quoted because they thought I was quoting too low. And I was like, wow, I was going into this kind of afraid. And it's really hard to kind of break out of, for us, a Midwestern, money humbleness and realize what these people are working with. But yeah, I think getting outside of this even more, my favorite pricing advice for people starting out is start with what would make you excited to do this. Because if you land the client, it's almost never going to take you less time than you expect. And I'm a big proponent of not doing hourly pricing, at least like project-based pricing or retainer pricing. So think in terms of what's going to make me excited tomorrow after they sign the contract to actually do this work and show up week after week until this is over. Because if you go into an agreement thinking, I'm underselling myself, you're going to resent that client. You're going to resent the process. You're not going to be excited to do it. So if you at least start with what makes you excited, you may still be leaving money on the table, but at least you're happy.
Yeah. It's funny. You just reminded me, one of my best clients, I did a lot of work with them. They were a white label client of mine. So I did work for like a lot of these websites they had me set up over the years. And at one point I remember saying, we're doing so many websites, I'll just give you like a bulk price, a discounted rate. And then he was like, can I give you some business advice? And he said, stick to your pricing, man, stick to your guns. And I couldn't believe he said that. Like he was offering just to pay me basically double what I offered. And he went for it. Like money to him was completely different from those people who were nickel and diming me for a big e-commerce type of site. So really, really, yeah, that's a great point, man. That gives me a lot of confidence. There's one other point you made a little bit ago I just want to put a cap on because I really resonated with this too. And that was valuing your service and your time. Like you talked about, somebody will pay you $5,000 to build a website, even though for you, you wouldn't pay that because you could do the work, but they don't know how to do that. They don't have your experience. I think that's such a valuable point to give people confidence with their pricing, because just remember the clients that you're talking to, they can't do what you can do, even if you're just starting out. And most of my students use WordPress, Divi, and they've gone through my process course, design, and the basics of SEO, some of the business stuff. Yeah, you may just be starting out, but you are 100 times more valuable than somebody who doesn't know anything about that.
Many steps
so they're
ahead.
going to pay for it. And I always think about too, in my networking group, there's a handyman. And one time, it just made me think of this. One time he was like, I can't believe that people are paying me to do these projects that they could do themselves. And I thought about that, but I really quickly realized why that's the case, because I hired him to do something I could totally do myself, which was to paint my fence. I power washed my fence last year. It was a very time consuming thing. To get it painted and to get it done right, it would have taken me a long time. Mm-hmm. So being that I have 2 kids and have a wife and have 2 businesses, basically I said, you know what, I'm just going to hire him. It was a few $100. And I could have saved a few $100, but how much time would I have had to invest in that? So I have that same mentality now with like house stuff. Like if it's not something I feel comfortable doing or I just don't want to do, I'm very quick to hire it out now. Yeah. And it's funny because like family and friends who don't have an entrepreneurial mindset, if they're a salary person, this is mind blowing because they're like, why would you pay somebody to paint your fence? You can paint your fence. Well, it's like, yes, I totally can. But if I have a day off, I'm going to spend it with my girls. And I don't want to be painting. If I wanted to paint my fence, I would have painted my fence. Like I love doing my lawn. That's one of my little tasks I love to do. I'm always going to do my lawn. But I don't want to paint the fence. I don't want to spend all day doing that. So I'm going to hire it out.
Opportunity cost is super real. And most business owners, if you're working with business owners, they recognize that too. Maybe they could do the website stuff. Like I'm pretty adept at WordPress now, but I'm getting to the point where maybe I would hire people to do this type of work because it's not the highest value way I could spend my time. I have my own unique strengths. I have my own unique ways that I can create value in my own business with how I spend my time. And business owners get that. A lot of people who aren't entrepreneurial, like you said, don't get it. They're the people who will spend 2 hours price shopping to save $5 on something. And it's like, well, don't you value those 2 hours? To me,
Right.
I am going to buy the first thing I find that solves the problem because I'm probably not going to be saving, more than $20. And I would so much rather just have the time not searching for that thing. Just let me buy the thing that gets the problem done.
Yeah. And I think I've seen a lot of clients come to me over the years that have tried to do it themselves. And then they realize even with some of these tools like Wix or Squarespace, these quote unquote easy do-it-yourself websites, they still take a lot of time to figure out. And the client understands, wow, I don't know jack about conversion or heading or images or optimization, all these other aspects of web design. And it can actually be a really good lead gen for people to come back to you and say, tried it myself. I don't have the time for this. Do whatever you need to do. I'll pay you whatever. That's actually a great position to be in. So
Totally.
I would say, yeah, don't go for those, don't worry if you're not landing every client. That was a really good point you made too. If your conversion rate is 100%, if it's a service-based product, you definitely are doing something wrong, which is weird to say. Like if you're selling 10 out of 10 people, something's wrong. Now, if you have like a website hosting and maintenance plan and your conversion rates are really high, that's great because you've got it in place, you could scale it. But if it is something that's time related, time intensive, you have to get your conversion rate down in a weird way because you can't scale it. If your time is where you're getting your money, then that has to be at a higher price point step by step.
It's a good signal. It means that the market wants what you're offering and at that price. But if your conversion rate's 100%, then you're leaving something on the table. Like people will pay more for it, or you're just not putting yourself out there. Like a lot of people that close 100% of business is because they don't do any outbound prospecting. They get a referral a month and that works out. Well, yeah, referrals have a really high hit rate, but you could probably be out there working harder to get more business. And some of that's going to fail. And that's part of the process. But there's opportunity that you're missing out on.
This may be a tough question because I imagine it depends on the industry and the situation, but what would you say is a reasonable conversion percentage when you're just starting out? I had a mentor years ago because when I got started, I just met with a bunch of business owners I knew in my personal and professional network. And he told me good sales is 20%. He was a pretty high up car salesman, I think, or maybe some sort of salesman in some sort of automotive branch or something. But he said 20%. I felt like that was really low. However, as I got going on in the industry, I realized my service related conversion rate was higher than that, but my website maintenance plan was really high. So when people were asking me like, what's your conversion rate? I would say, well, depends on what service. My website maintenance plan was at like 80%. So we're like, if I talk with 10 people, generally 8 would go for the maintenance plan and the other 2 wouldn't until they got hacked and they'd eventually come back. But the service stuff, that's where I really I got rid of the tire kickers and I focused on the qualified leads. And I would say it got up to probably 50% to 60% consistently. But it was one of those things where, similar to like what you just said, I didn't really put myself out there that much. I stayed within the referral network. And luckily, a lot of people came to me through referrals. So it was like hot leads. But I think that's a pretty good scenario. I probably could have raised my prices even more. What would you say, again, it was like a decent conversion rate that people could go off of?
This is tough because of a word you just used that's very key here, which is qualified. What does qualified mean to you? Like if it's a qualified lead, then your conversion should be pretty high. But a lot of leads aren't that qualified. And to me, qualified means that they have a problem that you can solve and they can meet the budget or within the ballpark of the budget that you would expect for that problem. And if those things are true, then you should be able to solve for a lot of them. But honestly, if you're just like really knocking out of the park, sometimes a lot of freelancers, they want to protect time for their own projects, and it's better off to work with fewer clients who are paying more so that they have more mental space. And for them, your conversion might be lower because you might be intentionally fishing for bigger fish. It kind of depends on the makeup of your overall business goals, how many clients you want to work with at a given time to cover your needs, and what qualified means to you. So to put a figure on it, I don't know.
Okay.
It shouldn't be 100%, but depending on, like, don't feel bad if it's low. Think about how you're qualifying people, try to qualify better, get it higher, but just know that you should face rejection at times, almost as just like good practice to know that you are, pushing yourself and hitting those levels of discomfort we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that's great. And I just hope that's empowering for people who are getting started out and are getting rejected every once in a while. That is okay. Like early on, I realized I'm going into this and I had a sense of projects that I felt pretty confident I was going to get. But then I was also I recognized that this company is reaching out to other people as well. I'm going to give it my all. But if I don't get it, I'm not going to sit and cry about it. First of all, I don't have the time. I've got other clients to service. So it's actually a good position because you can, you can't dwell on it for too long. But yeah, don't be discouraged if you're not landing 100% of your leads because it's just not the way it works.
Try to be real with yourself and look back at the tape, so to speak, at if something falls through, why did it fall through? And try to find out, try to get that feedback from the potential client, because if they have a problem that you can solve and it's not a price issue, then you must have failed somewhere in messaging. And you need to identify if you're falling flat in messaging and general salesmanship, because that's a problem. If you are losing leads that you should be closing because they have the budget and they have the problem, you need to hone in on your ability to lead the client through the process and make them confident that you are the right choice.
Yeah, that's great. I love that thought because I will say I've done that before. Clients are usually very receptive to that, or I should say leads, because they're not your client if you didn't get them. But I would do that all the time. If I didn't land one that I really was wanting to get, I would often follow up with, "Hey, I appreciate you letting me know. The door is always open if you want to ever talk to me moving forward. I'd always be happy to revisit this or help you guys out." And I would always ask if you wouldn't mind willing to share maybe why this one you felt wasn't another fit. I would just love to be able to refine any of my systems to help moving forward. And I always got really good responses from that, and it was very valuable. And it helped me with my proposal process. In one case, I remember somebody said, well, they did a video and guided us through. And I was like, oh, video for proposals. And then one person was like, they actually did a mock-up website. This was a high-end website. So I was like, oh, maybe on really high-end projects, we should do a little more in the mock-up stage. All those type of feedback, all that feedback can be so beneficial and to help with sales.
And something to put a point on that, because I love that, you need to come from a place of curiosity and like non-defensiveness. I think a lot of people might go into that and say like, well, what did I do wrong? And that's not going to work out. You need to go just like very humble, like you said, doors always open, would love to talk for future projects if you want to. By the way, I'm a business owner. It would mean a lot to me if you could help me understand where I fell short so that I can improve. That's the type of way to go about it. I have personally seen people who, they're sending me cold pitches over email, and I'm being nice enough to just not ghost them and say, no thanks. And I'll be like, well, why not? And it's like, I don't know you. Who do you think you are?
Particularly for web designers, don't be that guy or girl who's like, well, screw you. Hope your website gets hacked, or hope I never find your cPanel information because I'll take that sucker down. You don't want to be that bitter developer type personality. So
never works out.
Good. Yeah. Well, Jay, this has been great, man. We've covered some really good stuff. We've talked about some of the mindset stuff early on, just building that confidence with, I think a lot of it has to do with just those little wins, realistic expectations, but you also don't want to limit yourself. You want to give yourself a good path to follow. I think folks like me and yourself, hopefully people understand the reason we do what we do is to help people in this type of situation, because we've been there. We've learned a lot the hard way. So I think no matter what the case is, anybody listening, I would encourage you to find somebody who you identify with and resonate with to help guide you. You're the hero, but find a guide to help you with particularly some of the technical stuff and the processes and stuff that would take a long time to figure out yourself. I think it's very worthwhile. It's what I do. I learned that investing in coaching, even like I've had coaches tell me, you want to find somebody who's going to fit in your season, in your journey. Like a lot of people, I try to be as good as a coach and a course creator as I can for everybody. But if there's somebody else who you feel like is a better fit, that's fine too. Go with whoever is going to help you in this season. So I would encourage everyone to really take that seriously, to value your time. We talked about that. It was interesting. You talked about the why, but then also we hit on having a plan. Like if you're having a goal of 6 figures, why do you need 6 figures? Is 50,000 going to be fine this year for you? Maybe it is, but maybe 6 figures is what you need. And having a plan for that. I think that's huge. I'd love to just wrap up with the idea of maybe like daily disciplines or habits, because I think that's really important to breed confidence, because if you don't have good habits, you're just not going to be confident. And even if you are struggling with sales, if you have some other habits, I feel like that really backs you up and gives you a backbone to stand on. Any ideas, maybe just to wrap up with, whether it's exercise or certain habits, whether it's reading, anything like that sticks out to you?
Yeah. And I'm going to resist going off on too big of a tangent here, because James's book, Atomic Habits, is great on this. And my biggest takeaway for forming positive habits is to make the right behavior the easy choice, the easy behavior. So if you don't want to watch TV, put the TV away. If you, don't want to play video games, unplug it and put it away. Make it hard to do the things that you don't want to do and make it easy to do the things that you do want to do. Something I'll add here on your point of kind of some of these behaviors. I find most of the time, if I'm having a bad day or I have negative self-talk, honestly, it's because I either haven't exercised lately, I haven't drank enough water, or I didn't get enough sleep. So I really try to give myself grace and say, I think there's a chemical reaction happening in my brain right now. And I don't think this has anything to do with me. I think this is a chemical reaction. And I'm going to pause and just say, I need to drink more water, or I need to move my body. I'll go for a walk. I'll go for a run. I'll see if that changes, my chemicals. And if not, I'll, let myself take the rest of the day off. I'll go to bed. I'll wake up tomorrow. Tomorrow will be a better day. But for me, I don't think so much about habits as I think about commitments. And,
that's good.
To me, I commit to publishing a podcast every week. I commit to publishing a newsletter every week. I commit to showing up to my freelancing community every week. All these things are commitments that I've made. And yes, from the outside, it may look habitual because I'm doing it day after day, week after week, but it's not automated. Habits, I think, feel automated and like something is easy. And most of the time, being a business owner is mundane and not easy at all. It's just following through on the commitments that are what you need to do to get the job done.
What a great point, Jay. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I totally back that up. I didn't really think about that, but the idea of a commitment is so much more important because you really, as far as a habit, like you don't build a habit if you don't have an end goal or a commitment that you made to yourself. It's the classic case with dieting. If somebody says, "Oh, I really need to start dieting," and well, if you have a bunch of Twix and candy out in your living room instead of healthier choices, it's very easy, like you said, to get to that situation. Which I just had to tell my wife, I'm like, stop laying the Twix out so early before Halloween because they never make it to Halloween. But that is what a great point. It's so crucial to think about those early commitments, which those do build confidence. I totally agree. Like the podcast, I committed through August through the rest of 2020, I committed to doing 2 podcasts a week, an interview and a solo episode. Because I knew I could handle it. I have the bandwidth now, and I'm curious to see like what's it going to do instead of 1 a week. But I gave myself an end goal. At the end of 2020, that's when I'll reevaluate. I did the same thing when I started doing tutorial videos. I know you and I talked about meeting probably separately here to talk about some video stuff, but one way I built my catalog consistently, because a lot of people were like, how do you do so many videos? And I said, well, I gave myself some light at the end of the tunnel, and I gave myself a realistic deadline to do one a week for 3 months and just to see how it would go. And there were times where I felt like I didn't quite have it this week, but I was able to bulk record things. And that really just doing something once a week, even if it's just a season, really gives you a lot of freelancing muscle. I found the same thing to be true with my networking group. I was in a networking group for 8 years, and doing something once a week, year after year after year after year, it actually benefited me in so many other areas because it helped me not become a dabbler. I was able to see things through, which I think is probably what you're getting at.
Totally. And it also helps you better understand and take advantage of your capacity, frankly, because when you know that you have this amount of time and effort that's going every week towards this one thing, you're going to have to carve that out somewhere. You can't let yourself off the hook. When you don't have that level of commitment, things start to slide. And you say, yeah, I got 3 hours today, but I really don't feel like doing this. And it's Friday. This week, I'll just let it go and I'll do it next week. And things will just slide into perpetuity. When you don't give yourself the out, you find ways to make things happen. And when it's uncomfortable, you say, I don't want that discomfort next week. I'm going to make a better system and a better process for getting this done in a way that doesn't stress me out. You start to get more out of your time.
That's great, man. Well, what an awesome thought to kind of wrap up on and finish this off with. Jay, thanks so much for your time today and for dishing out some really good gold nuggets of thoughts and experience. I think I've taken a lot out of this. I can't wait to kind of reread through the show notes and kind of put an outline together for this. I know it's going to be super valuable for everyone listening, particularly for my audience who are new into web design and are struggling. And it's understandable. I get it. I've been there. I understand it can be a struggle when you're starting out to gain that confidence, but hopefully everything we talked about is an encouragement. Before we wrap up, I know we had talked about talking about some other stuff because you actually told you I'm starting a membership here soon. And then it was funny because the platform I'm looking at, I just happened to see your face at the bottom. It's featured on their homepage. I was like, hey, I'm interviewing that guy this week. So I'm really interested to hear more about the membership aspect and to pull some more out of your experience. So I think being that you're local, I think maybe I'll post something if we get together here soon because I owe you some coffee for sure, man.
Yeah, for sure. This is just the beginning. Thanks for having me, Josh.
Awesome, Jay. Real quick, where can people find out more about you? Where do you want people to go to connect with you?
You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Jay Clouse. My website is jayclouse.com. That will branch off to everything else that I do, the podcast, Freelancing School, wherever you want to go. Pretty easy to find, even if you just give me a Google, Jay Clouse.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jay. I'll link that all in the show notes, and I'll definitely have you on again soon, man. Maybe we'll talk value-based pricing next time.
Fun. Let's do it.
All right. Cheers, man. Thanks.
Hey guys and gals, just wanted to pop in with a couple things before you head out. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. I would love to hear your feedback, and it will also help other web designers find the show. Be sure to check out the show notes for this episode. Just go to joshhall.co, click on podcasts, and search this episode number, and you'll find all the links, descriptions, and resources we talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, and you'll be notified when the next episode is live. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next episode.